All right, here we are back for another episode of the Energetic Principles podcast, and I'm delighted to welcome to the program Debbie Stapleton. Thanks for joining me, Debbie.
Well, thanks for having me, Mel. This is so great. I'm excited to talk about my favorite season.
Oh, Capricorn season. Not
Yep.
everybody says favorite season
I
when it comes to
know.
Capricorn season.
Like who says Capricorn seasons in such a cheerful way?
Well, only a Capricorn would.
Like a Capricorn.
Only a Capricorn and a Capricorn moon. So we're right at home here
Yay.
today. Yes. So, and you know what? I think there's every reason to be a little bit cheerful about Capricorn season this year because there is that configuration, that square to Jupiter moving back into
Mm-hmm.
Aries, which we'll be talking about here today. So, before we get started, Debbie, tell the listeners a little bit about yourself.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm a Canadian astrologer. I live on an island in the Pacific Northwest, Vancouver Island, with my partner. Um, we are both musicians. I'm a singer. I'm also a painter, and I weave from time to time. So, um, yeah, I've been into astrology for a few decades now. And as I was sharing before we recorded it, I've tried to leave it and it keeps finding me. So I feel like it's my fate. I love it. Um, yeah. And don't know what else to say, really. Um,
Short and sweet's good.
yeah.
But I love that we have that in common. We have two female musicians here in the room
Mm-hmm.
today. Yeah,
It's
it's a
fun. I
special
can
bond.
see, yeah, I can see your guitars and all your equipment and everything in there. That's cool. I'm in one of those rooms too.
Yeah, if you're lucky, maybe you'll get a song at the end of this podcast.
We could start
uh,
jamming.
it is funny though when you think about music and astrology because a lot of times there is that link. There's a lot of astrologers that are musicians as well. You think just about music and the quality of pattern that goes along with
Mm-hmm.
music. They're both really mathematical, but they're both very intuitive at the same
Mm-hmm.
time. And they're both very, very clubby, right? When you're a musician, you have this special bond with other musicians. When you're an
Mm-hmm.
astrologer, you have this special bond with other astrologers because it's its own unique language, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very mercurial, very magician like. You're creating, meaning out of symbol decoding, like reading notes or reading planetary symbols. Yeah, so I think that's interesting because I feel like the astrologers, at least I know, they're very multifaceted and multi-talented because there's that acuity for um, creation and analysis and kind of conjuring in a way. There's something sort of magical about that impulse. We're all magicians of sorts.
We are. It's funny. Last night I recorded the year ahead program for 2023 with Gray Crawford. So spoiler
Mm,
alert, that will be coming out in a week after this airs. But we talked all about the magician energy and earth magic, especially for next year. So in the last couple days, the magician theme just keeps coming up, it seems. So
mm-hmm,
yeah, work your inner magician, people. We all have
mm-hmm.
one. So, all right, let us talk about Capricorn Solstice season 2022. We are rounding the bend on this year, which I can't believe. I feel like it just started just a few
Mm-hmm.
months ago, but now it's over. It's
Mm-hmm.
over. What was your impression of 2022 as a whole? I mean, I guess as a person, but also astrologically. Any things that stick out to you theme wise?
Yeah, it was definitely mixed weather. It was a mixed bag for me personally, and I felt like I saw that reflected in the astro weather. It's sort of like this kind of general sense that we're turning a corner. We're kind of getting these glimmers of hope. the clouds parting, like that kind of feeling. But then there were still, very difficult and tricky passages. And I still think we're kind of, it's almost like going across this sort of this tricky sort of suspension bridge with this long Mars and Gemini retrograde that yeah, it just sort of felt like I can see us turning the corner. I see shades of hope. I'm daring to dream again, but there is still a lot of work to do and a lot to traverse and sort out, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. I
Mm-hmm.
100% agree on all those fronts. There's definitely some figuring out to do. But I like the idea of like turning a corner and the clouds parting, right? We're just
Mm-hmm.
been in that Saturn Uranus crunch for so long, and the eclipses this year, my God, um yeah, so that's the nice thing about next year is that there it has its things, but it doesn't have that. And I really feel like Capricorn season is kind of the kickoff to all that, especially with
Mm-hmm.
Jupiter moving into Aries. But before we break into Capricorn energy, let's think about just we're at that solstice point, right? It is the darkest night of the year when the Capricorn sun ingresses on Wednesday, December 21st. And so any thoughts on solstice, just as a general, or any observations you have with that holiday?
Hmm. Yeah, for me, it has a real, like, I always sort of feel like that it's truly the new year, like the new
Mm,
astrological year. I mean, I'm sure like the Aries um, ingress also has this kind of new embarking kind of quality too. But I feel like there's something about the solstice. It really has, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, it really has a new moon type of quality or signature of like this, you know, fallow ground, the empty garden bed, and we're really just back at clearing the space for what's about to unfold out of the foundations of the earth. And yeah, it just always has a very beginning, sort of inceptional kind of quality to me.
yeah, I definitely agree with that because the first of the year is very arbitrary, the sense of like just
Mm,
energy and what's going on in the planets, and sometimes that lines up and sometimes it doesn't. But really, that solstice maneuver, and especially this year because we're going to have an almost immediate new moon in Capricorn at the same exact time. It's there really is just that fresh cardinal energy. The sun's light's just slowly starting to return there. Um, and when you were speaking and talking about like the garden bed, I was just thinking of, because that's what we think of when Aries season comes around, right? The maybe it's not so much the planting of seeds, but the seeds actually starting to sprout.
mm-hmm,
But Capricorn, before you plant anything, you have to till soil.
mm-hmm,
You have to check the nutrients and the pH, and like just get your nutritive energy into that soil for anything to grow to begin with. And so that feels like this is kind of part of that season. But
mm-hmm.
yeah, so I like that overall.
Yeah. And it's like before you can build anything, you need to lay the foundations. And before, yeah, like you said, like before things can kind of grow, you need to fortify the soil. And it's almost like a composting point. It's like everything that has happened in the year now has kind of shaken out and composted down.
Mm,
And then the quality of the soil is gonna kind of impact the nature of what grows and rises up out of that. So um, I sort of feel like the year unfolds from the foundations that we lay in Capricorn season, coming out of that zeal and vision of Sagittarian season, like getting reunited with our flame or a spark of what it is that we believe in, what it is that we have faith in, and carrying that ember into the darkness of the um, Capricorn season. It's like, yeah, it's like, all right, well, if you can dream as big as you're going to dream, fortify the deepest roots to kind of uphold it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a vision is just a vision until you begin to take the necessary steps or archetype it out in some way, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Jupiter is Jupiter, but we need Saturn to make it a reality. And that is what Capricorn season gifts us with. It's the start of back-to-back Saturn seasons, right? You know, when we think about
Mm-hmm.
Capricorn and Aquarius together, it's like, all right, we are officially entering Saturn's territory, but we do get a big dose of Jupiter, just because Jupiter, the day before the solstice, moves back into Aries, and is sitting at the Aries world point during the new moon in Capricorn. So there's just this fresh life and cardinal energy that is just being activated at this time, and there's a lot of inspiration. There's a lot of just like, all right, let's do this, like you said, the turning of the corner. It's like, okay, we've turned
Mm-hmm.
the corner, but now we're at this different corner turn that is all about taking that fresh life that a lot of us seek for ourselves, and that fresh inspiration, and getting having gone through Sagittarius season, right? When you talk about the vision, and the whole time we had Sagittarius season, basically Jupiter was finishing up its run in Pisces, which a little bit of a mixed bag, you know. Jupiter's so strong there, but it's I watched a lot of people going through, like, encountering grief within that and moving through things and letting go of things, and like just prepping the energy for what this new start is going to be. But that's not
Mm-hmm.
always easy emotionally, you know, depending on
Mm-hmm.
how your chart's configured or what you particularly went through. But so it's
Yeah.
it's an interesting lead up to this moment
Well,
too.
it's wild too, because through Sag season, the ruler of Sagittarius, Jupiter, is in Pisces, late Pisces, which obviously is a really dignified place um, for Jupiter to be. So, there was a lot of juice and a lot of boldness wanting to come forth. I sort of felt like in Sag season. But if you think about it, it's like that's the sun and Jupiter configured by square, and it's a square, whole sign square. So there's this like very, you know, catalytic kind of energy, but that square doesn't really um, actualize until we get into the cardinal side. And
Yeah.
as soon as those two hop over the threshold, it's like boom. And I have this like image in my mind. It's like of a mountaintop that's breaking open, and there's something volcanic coming out of the top of it. So it's like this Capricorn mountainscape, but that Olympian fire is kind of bursting out of the top. And I think there's been a lot of tension simmering and a lot of
Yeah.
want to grow and expand. And I just think it's sort of a brilliant signature to kick off Capricorn season with.
Yeah, absolutely. I just, as you were speaking, I was thinking about the volcanoes that are erupting in Hawaii. Yeah, just like that literal pressure. Because you're right. You know, the second that we had Sag season start, it just started to build pressure with Jupiter, and
Mm-hmm.
here we are, and that pressure is actualizing right out the gate. So we're going to want to pay attention, just in general, to our call to move forward during the solstice, and as we get to the new moon on the 23rd of December, because I feel like we're all being called in some way to take the next step of our growth journey, for whatever that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
For some people, that's entirely new, just writing something totally different. For some, it's the next chapter. You know, we all have different ways of expressing that, but we are all growing and expanding in big ways right now. So
Mm-hmm.
now, as a Capricorn yourself, what characteristics do you ascribe to Capricorn energy just as a whole? We talked about its foundational sense and the soil of it all, and the
Mm.
structural. Any other characteristics of Capricorn energy? I'm sure you have some wisdom around the subject.
Yeah, it's Capricorn consciousness. It has a very, concentrated and kind of stoic quality. The word that I think of most as a guide for Capricorn consciousness is like to be resolute. Like this is, the earthly domicile of Saturn. So there's a lot of, power and structure and fortitude and perseverance, but it's also the exaltation of Mars. So it's a place where one can wield a tremendous amount of power and determination and this propulsion, like this moving forward that, you're talking about. So I just think it's interesting that Capricorn season spans the calendrical new year where we make resolutions.
Yeah.
So it's the time when we say, I resolve to turn over a leaf, I resolve to do something and you knew with a new year. And I know there's like lots of ideas about these resolutions. Like people sometimes really set themselves up too much at the beginning and then they kind of tumble off and then they get discouraged. But there's just something baked very deeply into the Capricorn consciousness is that I resolve to stick around. I'm going to push through. And if it takes forever, no matter, it's the exaltation of Mars. So it's like that slow burning fuse, that slow burning energy. So, yeah, like Capricorns can uphold a lot. They're not necessarily really splashy and flashy, and they're not necessarily looking for, the spotlight or big credit or anything like this. But often, if you look behind the scenes or in the underpinnings of things or in the bones of organizations, you find a lot of earthy people or Capricornian people that are like, they're holding up a lot. So it can have the feeling of life is work. Like you're born ready to pull that plow. Like it's just the way it is. And people say, smile and cheer up and buck up. And you're like, dude, I got the weight of the world on me already. That, it's kind of like what we were saying in the beginning, like you've got a Capricorn moon, I've got a Capricorn sun, like folks that are acquainted with Capricorn consciousness through their chart archetypes, we've already kind of made our peace with the Saturnian, and it's already deeply fortified our bones and our structure, and we're kind of okay with it. We can be a bit jolly with it and laugh it off a little, but it's it's powerful, it's potent, and it can be the consciousness of carrying many burdens and having to play the long game. So I think once you finally end up being an actual old elderly Capricorn, I think that's when you're actually kind of age in reverse. You end up sort of catching up with your time. You're like, I was born old. I've been waiting to be this old sage. So yeah, I don't know.
It has that Benjamin Button feel to it, right?
Yeah,
Because
that's a good one.
Well, and I think like you said, it takes like time and wisdom and years for Capricorn to actually begin to kind of laugh it off or not to take it all so seriously, because that is definitely the thing about Capricorn is sometimes it can be like overly serious. It's definitely ambitious. And like you said, born to pull the plow. If I'm not pulling the plow, I don't know what to do with myself, right?
Exactly. What do you mean there's nothing to do? There's always something to do.
There's always something to do. There's always something that needs attention.
Yeah.
But I think that's kind of the wisdom and the fine wine of Capricorn as you age, as you still realize those things, but how you navigate it is different. Like when you're talking about the resolutions, right? And like Capricorn's so ambitious, and we start this year and people are like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that. And you're like, you forget that you're human. And then you set yourself up for failure, right? Which Capricorn hates, right? We are like, we were born with the fear of failure. And that's, yeah. So, but failure, failing up, we want to fail up and grow from it. But,
yeah, failure is just success practice.
It is. It absolutely is. It is just
Yeah.
practice for success. So we just gotta navigate that a little bit and stay a little realistic. That's another thing about Capricorn, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like to have that realism, that pragmatism.
Yeah, and I mean, it's one of the cardinal signs, so it's one of the four gateways to the turning of the seasons.
Mm,
So there's a leadership quality, wanting to uphold that um, earth earthly mastery, and a lot of energy for inceptions and beginnings. And out of the four temperaments, like if you get into the temperament scheme, like Capricorn is the melancholy temperament, Saturn being the natural melancholy planet. So there's the coolness, the dryness um, of that energetic. The coolness allows for the slower and more deliberate reaction, but also that strong retentive virtue, like the ability to remember, like a very long memory, you know, and the dryness gives you that quality to sort and perceive. Um, but I mean, if we think about, Marsilio Ficino, the Renaissance astrologer and magician, he was born a melancholic, or and a lot of his work is designed to heal and balance out melancholy, because even though it has some really strong assets that it brings, at the same time, it's not necessarily the conditions of life. You want moisture and you want warmth to create that fecundity and that growth and generativity. So Capricorn, it's interesting. It begins the winter season, and that's kind of like what it's all about. It's like the growth has slowed down. Everything's very underground, and we need other things to kind of kindle us and warm us and care for us as we move through the winter season.
yeah.
So
The
that's
winter
something to think about.
blues.
Yeah.
That's a real thing. It's like when winter starts, because that, like you said, that Capricorn is the season change. At least here, well, it's a season change anywhere in the world, but in the Northern Hemisphere, it's the winter
Mm-hmm.
solstice. And that back-to-back Saturn, Capricorn to Aquarius is literally the start and the dead of winter. And
Mm-hmm.
so, we just think about like when it's winter, we hunker down. It has this, we have to have that endurance to get through the cold and the harsher elements, and
Yeah,
but not
like
being buried by it either, and
right.
get that winter depression that can possibly come out. So,
Yeah, you got to keep the fires burning. You got to keep the warmth kindled, and keep the fires of your digestion cooking, um, and that's, I kind of feel like, is the flame. It's like lighting the torch in Sag season and then marching into the darkness of Capricorn season. It's like carrying that. It's like keeping the hearth, or it's like keeping the flame of the heart alive.
yeah. So I think Jupiter might help us a little bit with that.
Yeah.
Jupiter might give us just that spark that we need. Now, of course, as we talk about Saturn, he ruling this season and the next couple seasons here, that's focus is going to switch to Saturn and Aquarius, who is well direct at this time, right? Turned direct in October. So we've just been plodding along with this direct Saturn that is really on its way to wrap up this Aquarius transit. So as
Mm-hmm.
we go through Capricorn season and we go through Aquarius season, these are the final throes of Saturn and Aquarius and our time there. So whatever house that is in your chart, or especially the Saturn ruled houses just in general, it's like think about the end leg of that journey.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it feels like any thoughts on Saturn, just the emphasis of Saturn and Aquarius, or just Saturn wrapping up or getting ready to wrap up its transit?
Yeah, well, again, we're entering a solar season with the ruler of the season being really dignified. Like, that's a really strong Saturn. Still has a real formidable signatures. So I think it potentially, you know, strengthens sort of the feeling of concentration, or strengthens the container of Capricorn and Aquarius season, wherein, you know, we'll be visioning and studying and continuing to grow. Um, but yeah, I think it's kind of, it's been a long winter astrologically. Like
Yeah.
we've
Oh
had,
yeah.
like this is, we're wrapping up now about 5 years of ultimate Saturn. Saturn has his virtues, but it's definitely like a wintry mood where, you know, growth has been truncated, socialization has been really impeded. And one of the things, of course, you know, Saturn deals with is mortality and the fears that can arise around that. And we've really had to confront that, like our foundations being shaken with all of the Uranus tension. Um, and so it is really hopeful to know that Saturn's going to be rolling out, but we've got one more winter now with that very formidable Saturn. So it's that last um, gust of snow as we're leaving the ice flow, and we see the green pastures as we come down from the pole. So um, yeah,
Yeah.
the end is in sight. But just to remember, I think maybe what could be cool if folks want to have some ideas of intentionality for this winter, like since this is going to be our last long, you know, cosmic winter of sorts, as Saturn wraps up its time in its home signs, think about the ways that you were tested. Think about the ways that you were fortified. Like when you carry a strong burden and a strong weight, your bones get denser. When things break down and heal in the bones, they get thicker and stronger than they were before. So all of the ways that we've been kind of um, really burdened, is there a way that you can create some meaning or some poetry out of it? But had I not been tested, I would not have discovered the strength. Had I not been shown the limit, maybe I would not have learned how to adapt. Maybe I would not have known my capacity for survival by facing my fears, facing my anxieties, and having to really come to terms with all the things that we thought were permanent and enduring. The force Uranus of change is always
Yeah.
churning. So, what have we learned from confronting the things that we thought we could rely on are also subject to the forces of change? And I mean, it's not all, you know, and it's not all good. There's been a lot of grief, there's been a lot of loss, um, you know, but woven into that, I hope there can be some philosophy about some of it could have been you know, faded. Some of it could have been meant to be. Some of it could have been, or at least really good grist for the mill. Like it really, which is another very Saturnian kind of symbol, like grinding, grinding with that millstone, grinding the wheat down. It's all hard work. But then in the end, we actually have something that we can work with. We've got some grain, we've got some flour. Like, what do we want to make out of all of this? Um, yeah, I guess that's some
Yeah.
of the things that come to mind.
That those are definitely applicable uh to the current state and the past state. I like the idea of we're leaving the long winter, right? It's not just this winter, it's like we are in the winter of our times.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and Uranus has been testing that the whole time, and we're going to see some more of Uranus this season too, because that new moon in Capricorn squaring Jupiter is going to be followed by a full moon in Cancer that is going to be exactly configured in a flowing formation to Uranus and Taurus. So there
Mm-hmm.
there seems to be some Uranian form and breakthrough that is available this season. And of course, we're going to have cardinal quarters too. And, you know, when we have cardinal quarters, everything's pushing forward with that initiating
Mm-hmm.
energy and that kind of taking leadership and taking, you know, stepping up and moving forward and pivoting and just ready to do this. Like that is part of the lunar activity this time
Yeah.
around.
I thought that
Um,
was really cool that you pointed that out, because I didn't really um I hadn't really like thought about that yet, but I think about those cardinal quarters as like, gateways, like
mm,
what doors will open at every quarter, like that, for the inception or the beginning or the entry into the new year. Yeah, I feel quite excited about the month actually.
yeah, me too. I do. And but it's interesting to throw in, we got to throw a few things in there like Mercury stationing retrograde in Capricorn. So we're going to
Oh
have our
no, right.
So there is, which is interesting to think about just because, we are still in Mars retrograde in Gemini. And so
Yep.
Mercury is the ruler of that Mars. But I think it is a very purposeful retrograde station of Mercury. And it's all going to, because 2023, well, and this starting with this retrograde, Mercury is going to be retrograding solely through Earth signs. So these are very
Mm-hmm.
practical, planning oriented, getting your puzzle pieces together, periods of Mercury retrograding. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then of course Mars is going to go direct during the season too, while Mercury is retrograde. So we have these, we're not quite out of the retrograde woods yet necessarily, especially with Mercury turning back now. But, think about everything that we've learned with Mars being retrograde in Gemini. It's been a long haul,
Mm-hmm.
since October 30th when it's stationed. It's been in Gemini since what, like August,
Mm-hmm.
it's been a long time, but it's intriguing to me that it wraps up and starts to emerge while Mercury is still sorting the bits and pieces out. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's interesting how the overlap of the ruler of Mars going retrograde whilst Mars is still retrograde. It's like a doubling up of
Yeah.
that.
Retrograde, retrograde.
My kind of catchphrase for Mars retrograde is fall back, retreat. It's like fall back and re-strategize, because it can kick up a lot of frustration when you just want to have that kind of forward moving momentum or propulsion that you'd expect of directing the Mars energy. But it's interesting that then Mercury will be retrograde too. So it's like another layer of pulling back to reflect, um, like a mental retreat or a mental reset or a focus that Mercury retrograde is pretty much all of Capricorn season.
Yeah, it goes retrograde on the 29th, right smack dab in the middle of everyone trying to, travel for the holidays and the new year and
Right.
all that. And of course, the interesting thing about Mercury retrograding this time around is it's going to be conjunct Venus, which was much like last year when Venus went retrograde in Capricorn. At
That's right.
this time, and then Venus goes on to conjunct Pluto. I think on the New Year's Eve, the night of New Year's Eve, Venus is conjunct Pluto. So we have a very
Yeah.
interesting setup that we're going to get into as we break down the month ahead. So I guess let me share my screen for those of you who are watching the video. We're going to get in to our forecast here. We got a lot to break down, Debbie.
Yeah.
So so here we are starting with our solstice, which is December 21st, 2022 at 4:48 Eastern. We're in Pacific time, but I did set the chart for Washington just to have a look-see.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting with the sun on the descendant there, at least for the capital of the US.
Hmm.
Lots of other folks and involved here, but that's another thing for another time. But what we see is this Jupiter freshly into Aries. I mean, it's only 7 minutes in, and the sun is on its way to complete that square on basically this same day. It happens the same day as the solstice, where we get this burgeoning cardinal Sun, solar, Jupiter action, which we've kind of broken down pretty much here.
Mm-hmm.
But what we can also see happening too is Venus, who is getting to the the smack dab middle of Capricorn here, is in a trine with Uranus as we get solstice season underway, and it's a dark moon, right? We got a Sag moon on solstice, so we're still it's a quieter feels quieter to some extent, uh but also like connective. It's exciting. It's like opening, Venus being just open to new forms and being having that inventive Uranian action and like fresh connections. I do like that for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely has a very creative, inventive, and generative signature, like with the Sun and Jupiter and that Venus and Uranus. Um, yeah, it just strikes me as kind of like some, I don't know, like aha moments, like really bold insights. Like, I'd be really curious for folks to kind of track that. I'm going to want to pay attention too. Like, I know I'm kind of already thinking it may feel that way, but wondering if something like if that turning of corner into the new season will almost sort of will feel the excitement or sort of feel like, I don't know, like our awareness shift into that um, receiving creative insight, like if there'll be any swiftness or speed to how that arrives around that time.
Yeah, I mean, if we think about it, it's like it comes in with that balsamic Sag moon ruled by Jupiter. So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times, those intuitive just forces kind of come in from the dark, and we have maybe that quiet inspiration where it's not like that out there in the world, but it's still just lifting us up in some way, like more of an internalized
Mm-hmm.
space. And we're more just open to what is forming or how change is coming. Or maybe we're having more private talks with our loved ones and bringing up things of a Uranian nature with the Venus Uranus trine there. We also might be doing a mad dash to finish our shopping for the holidays and things along those lines. It does feel a little bit like that as well. Feels very shoppy.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Well,
Well,
yeah, and that's interesting what you say about the internalized kind of energy. I do feel like that, and I mean that theme is going to come up a bit more too with Mercury's retrograde, but it does have this very internal, receptive kind of quality. But check out the moon opposite Mars on its way to
I
join the
know.
sun. It's going to grab some of that Mars, our opposition and spark, and take that spark into that really interior sort of new moon space. So it's got some spice in there.
There's some spice. You know what it makes me think of is like especially if we're getting to this cardinal new moon and Jupiter action, we want to move forward. And a lot of times we move forward with things because we're done with something else. Like we're
Mm-hmm.
irritated by something else. We are fed up with we want to cut this from our lives or our realities or from our personal intellectual processing in some way. And so I mean, it could even have that signature of just being like kind of over something that's carried
Mm-hmm.
into what the potential of what's next is there. Like a last straw type of vibe, if that makes sense.
I think so. Like, and Mars having a bit of that sort of cutting or severing kind of quality, like almost making a break emotionally with maybe something that had been frustrating, a source of anxiety,
Yeah.
or, you know, this isn't this isn't working. So running, yeah, very much that reaction of moving away from something and towards something and not really knowing exactly what yet, but knowing something's got to give.
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of like that. I kind of like that. Because, when you're done with something, like, especially with mutable energy, right? You gotta go back and forth. You're like, I'm done with this. And the next day you're like, nah, I'm gonna stick around. Like it
Mm-hmm.
has this like, you know, cancer energies like that too with the moon quality. But it is very potent when that in your heart of hearts that you're like, I'm done. I
Mm-hmm.
am done. I have made the decision where this is it with this. And then you can really move on because the energy is not stagnant and held up in the same space of going back and forth from, whatever it is that's, yeah,
Yeah.
getting in your way.
Yeah. And then going into that, cardinal Earth season with the sun square Jupiter, again, it's that theme to be resolute. It's like when now you're done, but you have to kind of know what you're done with so that you can be resolute about the next step.
Yeah. Be very clear, right? So this brings us to our new moon on Friday, December 23rd. It's going to be here early in the morning here in the US or in North America. So we have, as you can see, we have 1 degree and 32 minutes. The lunation is happening at. And it is squaring Jupiter there and that still on that cardinal world point. So this is definitely a cycle that is very newsworthy, and there will be, as we turn the corner, that wheel of fortune energy in our lives, the world is going to be doing the same. So I have a feeling we can definitely expect some big headlines and brand new things kind of coming to the surface or being introduced that could play roles, much larger roles as time goes on.
Mm-hmm.
um but in our, to break it down here, obviously that new moon is ruled by that Saturn in Aquarius that we were talking about earlier. And it's, Saturn's not really directly aspecting anything. I mean, it's in a very, very, very loose trine to Mars separating over there in Gemini.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of on its own to some extent. We got Mars retrograde sextiling Chiron. If you work with Chiron, there's some Chiron energy going on there. And actually Chiron just happens to be stationing direct at this time too.
Hmm.
So so you put your Chiron filters on if you follow Chiron, because there's definitely something to this position. So any thoughts on no one's really talking to Saturn?
Yeah, Saturn is sort of kind of lurking. But look, that Saturn's in the term of Mars. So Mars, that kind of wily, many irons in the fire, Mars has got a little something to say about Saturn. But that's, yeah, Saturn's sort of seeing into Aries, and that's at least a flowing whole sign position. But I don't know, like maybe it's just a moment of suspending, you know, the formalities, or kind of, you know, taking away some of the austerities so that
Hmm.
we can maybe have the hubris to kind of push through and um I don't know, make some of these exciting changes or resolutions.
It made me think when you said that of suspending judgment for a second, right? Because that's the
Yeah.
thing with Capricorn energy is sometimes we don't can't, you can hold yourself back because you have all, like, you already figured it out. Like there's a pessimism that comes along with Capricorn
Mm-hmm.
energy
Mm-hmm.
sometimes. And so I wonder if kind of suspending that judgment and like leaning into that Jupiter a little bit more. And then
Mm-hmm.
maybe we'll figure it all out once we have all the Saturn activations in Aquarius there. Um,
Maybe
but
just like maybe a little word of caution, because I know that mm, Saturn's messages are not always convenient, but sometimes they're still necessary. And I think because we're also Saturn weary, there could be that want, that enthusiasm to just dispense with, you know, the having a sober look. And maybe it's just a reminder to kind of have, just hang on, just have that little extra ounce of patience, um you know, but at the same time not feel too sort of burdened. It's kind of parking Saturn for a minute, so that Saturn's in the garage. We're over here doing something else. Saturn, just hang out for a sec. I have to figure something out. So yeah, it is interesting.
Yeah. And so, well, we'll see, you know, and sometimes when a planet is not aspected either, it kind of becomes its own importance in its own spot too. So, I mean, think about Aquarius area of your chart and kind of what's going on there. And if there might be a missing link that is, you know, could be overlooked or something that you want to pay attention to within the push for growth. Um, let's not forget about that entirely.
Mm.
But then Chiron stationing at the same time and Mars sextiling it. It's just an interesting component within uh especially when we kind of like outlined the idea of the moon opposing Mars right before the solstice. And like we're looking at like maybe irritations and triggers and drawing the line with something and asserting oneself in a way to move forward. Uh, you know, Chiron in Aries really has that quality of right assertion to some extent, and feeling comfortable in your ability to assert, but also not blowing things up where it is triggering or painful to everything around you. It's like learning this balance um within just moving from a place of wisdom with just action energy as a
Mm-hmm.
whole. And so it's just an interesting component to add in here. I don't know if you have any thoughts on it or not.
Well, it's nice that it's flowing, again, a flowing aspect with Mars. It gives me that feeling of like lancing to release pressure, like
Mm,
lancing, you know, Chiron could be pointing to some of the woundedness around her individuality or sovereignty or personal kind of expression, you know. And I feel like being in such a long astrological winter of sorts, you know, there's been a lot of our, you know, ourselves and our desires and our individuality that's kind of truncated, and you know, could lose some confidence, could lose some steam. And I don't know, I just sort of feel like maybe Mars is offering some release or some catharsis, or um you know, it could be something kind of healing there. But
yeah.
and maybe, you know, sometimes like what Mars can kind of push on and activate, maybe something could come out in a really strong and bold way, but maybe that's just the pressure release that's needed, just as long as it's coming from an intention of healing and authenticity, and not to cause further wounding that we
Yeah.
can be conscious of, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It almost had when you talking about like lancing the wound, I started to think about like ripping off the band-aid
Ah.
to some extent, you know, where sometimes we have to like assert our individual energy in a way that is, you know, you kind of got to do what must be done, and maybe it's not as gentle as you'd like it to be, but it's like it's part of the individuation process in some
Mm.
way, and you just kind of have to do it, especially since, I mean, Mars is ruling that Chiron stationing, and Mars is getting very close, you know, it's only a couple weeks out from it's getting really slow basically because it's going to
Mm-hmm.
station only 2 degrees away from this point. So but because of that, I like what you said about it being an opportunity, right? A sextile gives us that opportunity to assert our energy in a way that could be very healing, even if it is not just a gentle bomb. Like sometimes healing is through something that is a little difficult or painful to do, like especially if yeah. So
Yeah, like you said, like ripping off the bandage. If you just kind of, you're just sort of picking around the edge, it's never going to come off. Like sometimes you just got to, like, get it over with and
then
be
you're free.
bold and be strong, you know.
Yeah.
Uh,
Um, Another thing that's going on around this new moon and really happens the following day is Mercury is making a sextile to Neptune. And that will be significant because that sextile to Neptune is part of Mercury's retrograde cycle. Um, where once again, we're kind of coming back to this place of what's possible and kind of dreaming and taking in that Jupiterian energy and visualizing, taking the form of Earth with that Neptunian water. And so I feel I really like this Mercury Neptune connection for this whole Mercury retrograde, just because it feels very like Imagineering in my mind, or like creative.
Yeah, I love it too. And yeah, it's interesting to know because of the retrograde path, that one on that's coming up first, that's the first of three that we'll have. And I feel like that
Yeah, the
first.
second's on New Year's Day. So
Mm-hmm.
talk about the resolution you were talking about.
Yeah, so it could be kind of fun to sort of put a pin in that, like whatever it is that you're dreaming up around the 24th, you know, around the first, you'll revisit it and maybe have an opportunity to dive back in. Having this, like, Mercury and Capricorn, it's got this very sort of tangible, it makes me think of like a little wooden craft or a little wooden boat that's about to push off into this grand Neptunian sea. And I don't know, like just different programs and movies I've been watching and things I've been seeing, this theme of like going overboard or jumping over the edge, like a lady jumping off a ship, or like I'm just seeing this kind of coming up, like it's almost like the little craft pushing off on the 24th, and then wondering if it kind of hits a bit of an eddy or a capsizing where you're going to have to actually swim midway through that retrograde cycle. It's like a journey, because it's like, well, where is Mercury
Hmm.
taking us? Like Mercury the psychopomp, when it goes, when they go retrograde, it's taking us somewhere off the beaten path, or somewhere circuitous that we would not have discovered had we kept on our regular road or trajectory. So to know that Neptune is really bound up in that, um, it's a journey of the imagination. What is it that you said? You phrased it nicely as we just came in about
Mm,
Mercury and Neptune.
I think I was talking about Imagineering.
Yeah,
Um,
Imagineering.
yeah, it's like, because Saturn's great and Capricorn's great at engineering. I'm sure you find lots of Capricorn and Aquarius energy in engineering. When we add that Piscean quality to it, and that vision and that Neptunian energy, yeah, Imagineering.
Imagining, Imagineering what will be engineering.
Yeah. And sometimes the things we imagine aren't that practical, or maybe we need to work out some things, right? And that's part of the Mercury retrograde there. But and it's, I mean, honestly, it's kind of nice. It's like the whole from the 24th. I mean, the 24th is Christmas Eve. If you celebrate Christmas, that's a big lead into the holiday.
That's my
Um,
birthday. Nice little return.
Oh, well, there you go. You can tell. I'll ask you a year from now, Debbie. You'll be able to tell me all about Mercury sextile Neptune.
I feel like
Um,
that's my invitation to get my guitar out and play some music on my birthday.
I think it is. And carry it on, carry that tune for the rest of the week, because it's like
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Mercury is going to station on the 29th. And right before on the 27th and 28th, especially the 28th, because the moon's going to be in Pisces, we have Venus making a sextile to Neptune too. So all these planets are kind of just jiving with Neptune and chilling, right? I mean, it's the holiday season. It's like this is our time when we're not trying to get a whole lot of things done. despite the
Mm.
Capricorn vibe that's going on. So it feels like a really nice, just connective week. That might have its few blips here and there on like the details, obviously, with Mercury slowing down and configured to Neptune. So it's definitely a go with the flow type of time period, especially if you're traveling, because we know Mercury is famous. Mercury stationing is famous for throwing little uh spokes in our travel wheels. So definitely be in the spirit of flow
Mm-hmm.
from the 24th to the 1st. Um yeah. So
Yeah, it was a really creative signature, huh? Like
it
that
is.
Mercury, Venus both hooking up with Neptune. And yeah, like what you were saying earlier about like things that we dream up, it's not always practical. But I'm thinking, yeah, exactly, because even just that act of dreaming, it in itself has some soul value. Like we need to go on these imaginal journeys. We need to listen to the symbols and take the cues that are coming up. It's very soulful to me, that
Mm,
that time and that connection. Like pay attention to themes, echoing themes, what's coming up in the dreamscape, that this could be something of the soul or dialoguing with our waking awareness, where, you know, going down the rabbit hole, so to speak.
yeah, because our dreams tell us things, rather whether despite whether they're waking or in while we sleep. Um, And when you're talking about like engaging with symbols, I mean, when we engage with symbols in that more abstract plane, we can extract some sort of meaning from it. And maybe that meaning is, that purpose isn't entirely tangible at times, but there is something about it that we can take back and then move that into our earth moves to some extent. Because it's
Mm-hmm.
like when you keep imagining something or you keep dreaming about something or daydreaming about something, like that's your like soul basically saying, engage with me. how do
Mm-hmm.
how do I take you from beyond the image of my imagination? What are the next steps that are involved there? Because some of it is fantasy, some of it is not meant to be realized. But some of it,
Mm-hmm.
when it just keeps repeating and it's coming up and it's like slipping into the back of your mind and you're having dreams about it, or you encounter synchronicity on the street or something that just brings that into your, kind of that observer effect into your world.
Mm-hmm.
um there is, yeah, it's like then we can take that back in as Mercury goes back around and tries to figure out its plans, and it's in that strategic Capricorn space. But that'll be part of a longer journey, right? And then it's going to tie into that Mars stationing direct. So I
Mm-hmm.
feel like you said, this is a very soulful time. This is a very creative, like lean into it. Have fun with
Yeah.
it feels pretty profound too, to some extent, because here we have Mercury stationing on Venus basically on the
Mm-hmm.
29th, which is another very creative aspect, right? That muse is speaking to our perception. We're downloading what Venus's message is, and then she basically just moves on to the last day of the year on New Year's Eve to make a conjunction with Pluto, which is always an interesting transit um in
Mm-hmm.
in just relationships and your inner sense of wholeness, and like that
Mm-hmm.
creative profundity. So what do you think about kind of this crossing over of Venus as Mercury stations and then she goes on to connect with Pluto?
Yeah, that's interesting. It's got a real like descent kind of quality. Again, bringing up that theme of something internal or interiority. Um, it's taking all of that, dreaming and creative potency, the the soul journeys, but there's something kind of, submersive or spelunking about like now going down into the cave, going somewhere deep with it, that it's sort of like a hidden or underground frontier that might be a source of discovery, a tremendous sort of power, or like a creative gold is waiting, you know, in that shadowy space. It's interesting, huh? Because last year, Venus stationed retrograde pretty close to Pluto.
Yeah.
And now I feel like there's an echo where um, this echo in this cave, she's come back. So I don't
Especially with
know.
Mercury transiting her territory from before. Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah. So it could have, themes. I like the idea of that, an echo. Because a lot of the stuff that is like buried deep within, that Plutonian territories is not anything new, right? It is embedded in some way. So yeah, just kind of being in the echo chamber. Especially the echo chamber in relation to that whole Pisces time, because the moon's going to be in Pisces when Mercury stations. But then we get that first quarter moon in uh Aries on the 30th, right before Venus makes a conjunction with Pluto. So even though it has this watery and dreamy and like, doing the cave diving and going within, it gets really hot emotionally, and kind of pushing off, and that just that tension, especially when she does make that conjunction, because the moon essentially is going to be squaring that placement. So
Mm-hmm.
what started as this kind of initiation into Plutonian territory, and we were like hearing like, yeah, like the call and the descent, there's just something that really can get triggered at that time, or just or called into like initiation, or and is part of like that, just this push of this whole season, to some extent too, with that lunar activity that's gonna basically square the sun, then Mercury retrograde, then Venus, and then Pluto. So we just get a
Mm-hmm.
big hit lunar wise, of of Aries Capricorn energy.
Yeah, it's sort of like got a bit of a tight passage. Makes me think of that um the the Odyssey, like the Scylla and Charybdis, where they're passing through that watery passage, where on one side there's like a monster that could devour them, and on the other side is a really dangerous whirlpool that could pull them in. So it's got this caught between the Scylla and Charybdis kind of qualities. So yeah, it could be a tight passage to navigate, because there's a lot of passion and potency and power in that melding of
Yeah.
Venus and Pluto. um, Something very I don't know, just sort of opening up a potent box of potential, and then that moon sort of pushing on it. Either it's got a very like inceptional make or break kind of quality, or it sort of pushes another kind of catharsis moment. I don't know. It's
It made
very
me think of like,
interesting.
it is. It made me think of opening up a can of worms
Yeah.
with with the way you were describing it. But sometimes we need to open up the can of worms, right? Because the whole idea of Pluto is the purification that goes through,
Mhm.
with the willingness to get to the depths of something. And open that Pandora's box, so to speak,
Mhm.
so that you can get to the nugget that lies there, or the regenerative aspect,
Yeah.
because as Gray and I talked about in great detail, in the next episode with the 2023, it's like Pluto has a big role to play,
Mhm.
um coming up here. So just all these, especially these planetary conjunctions, and just activations, like these are larger stories that will kind of crest and move through 2023, too.
That's a really good
So
point, because we're in our final you know, moments from a cosmic perspective of Pluto in Capricorn, and Pluto's been there for, a couple of decades now. And, Pluto's arc is cycle is very, very long. So this is the end of an era. So if there
Yeah.
are some really potent themes that kind of come up around that time, it might be pointing to um, something poignant about a closing of an era and maybe the beginning of a new one.
Yeah. That ending beginning quality.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. Well, luckily, we have time to ponder that on the first because Mercury's going to, put sextile Neptune. Maybe we're all just going to be in our heads and we're going to be, but it's interesting too because then the moon moves in Taurus around the first of the month. So we go into the first day of the year in this with the moon in Taurus, which is stabilizing, but only so much so with Uranus, co-present there. But I think it's kind of a nice place to be. And so we probably just want to, take it all in as we start the first day of the year. Take your time with things. I think because really there's a little bit of space going on. I mean, the moon is going to go over Uranus on the first two, I believe. And that will be significant in respects to, let me see, I guess there's probably a better way to do that. Because the next move is basically the sun is making a trine to Uranus on the 5th, January 5th. Well, actually, it's going to trine the North Node on the 2nd, and then trine Uranus. So the moon moving through this North Node Uranus territory on the first day of the year is kind of a highlight to just this, illumination around the Taurus North Node, like evolutionary push. Uranus, like what's breaking apart and being re-envisioned and invented and upgraded. In these very physical states of being, right? Capricorn and Taurus both. So this to me is very nice for the start of the new year too, because Venus is going to move into Aquarius on the 2nd. She gets in there. And then she's going to sextile Jupiter on the 4th. So we have this it's really nice configuration. I feel like, especially as opening energy for the beginning of the year, especially with Venus sextiling Jupiter and ruling, the Taurus placements there. I like it.
Yeah, that feels like some sweetness on the other side of that really dreamy and potent passage.
Yeah.
And both of the luminaries lighting up that Uranus North Node, first the moon and then the sun. So it's really illuminating and bringing that awareness of, I don't know, like it's almost like a feeling sort of a freedom or emancipation. It's like coming over the other side. Oh, we made it. Like it might be people just screaming, oh my God, we made it to 2023. It's just, it feels like an opening kind of signature. And I look forward to that.
I do too. And, in relation to everything that we were just talking about with Venus and Pluto together, yeah, she does do the descent. She does have to go into this territory. But on the other side, she gets a little more detached. She moves into Aquarius. She's got like a more airy perspective. And then she's working with Jupiter. So, she gets a boost. She gets a boost after going through that Plutonian landmine for a second. And then, like you said, kind of that liberation quality with the Uranian North Node action coming in too. So it just really I just really like the vibe of this.
Yeah, there's going to be some creative gold in the darkness of that Venus Pluto conjunction. So hang on, because there might be something really interesting, an interesting way to like integrate it and utilize it on the other side.
Yeah, that's entirely fresh, right? We're talking about Jupiter and Aries at the beginning
Mm-hmm.
degrees of like this transit that is just going to continue and rocket through until mid-May. So that, yeah, it is fresh and it's promising. And it really is just leading us to the full moon on June or January 6th. That is going to be configured to Uranus, right? So we think about these Uranian, the sun trining Uranus, the moon going over that point in Taurus, Venus's action as well, just as the ruler of that placement, and her having talked to Jupiter, and then bam, we get a domicile full moon with that moon in
Mm-hmm.
Cancer. Um, and I like this one too, personally. I mean, this is definitely configured to my chart, so I better like it. I'm gonna be living it.
Oh,
But
wow. That'll be
yeah,
on my nodal axis, that full moon.
yeah, yeah. These are literally my degrees of my sun and moon. So this is the reverse of my my
Oh,
luminaries.
wild.
Yeah.
Wild.
So, which is gonna
That's
be fun,
cool.
It's like you get a hit of I get a hit of sun on my moon, I get a hit of the moon on my sun.
Oh, that's really cool. And then it's like really um plugged in and lit up with that Uranian
That Uranian juice, the Uranian
emancipatory.
that earthy underground electric
Mm-hmm.
that is coming through. It feels like a very solid form based full moon, right? We've got a strong earth and water elements. I mean, anybody that's in the process of like changing jobs or changing um home situations or just moving, pivoting in those areas of life. This is always a full moon that is very much connected with that, when we think about the Cancer Capricorn axis. So if anybody's on the move, so to speak, in these prime areas
Mm-hmm.
of life, I could see this definitely being a highlight point. We do have that Chiron square that's in there too. So if you need to learn a little bit about Chiron, there could be just that little bit of that triggery, irksome, but also the healing wisdom that could come out of that just before that full moon happens. It's like it gets the tension from Chiron, then it gets to Uranus. It's like, whatever. I'm done with it. Like I don't want to carry that weight. I just want to be free. Let me be
Yeah.
free.
Well, it's like sort of putting some space and some freedom and some fertile possibilities around, healing. Um, because that Uranus really opens up that axis between, the moon and the sun, and yeah, it's it's kind of cool. I feel like it's going to be a bit of a high vibe, high energy signature.
Well, especially with Mercury too, because Mercury is here retrograding and lurking over the sun, right? Yeah, I think it's the next day, not even the next day. It's like it crosses over just right after this full moon when we have the inferior Cazimi
Mm-hmm.
of Mercury. It'll be technically January 7th, the following day, but the moon will have not moved on that much. So there is something to be said about the full moon. And then all of a sudden, Mercury has this message and it sits in the heart of the sun at that very same degree. And so there's another point of like transference
Mm-hmm.
kind of going on, which I also like within that, right? Because I mean, what happens next? We basically have Mercury then going on to trine Uranus again, which,
Mm-hmm.
as Debbie and I are speaking, Mercury actually trines Uranus in a couple days here this weekend as we're recording this. So
Oh
that's that
yeah.
kind of like intro to it. But it's like this double shot of like just like intellectual awareness, just like perceiving something very Uranian in nature, and wanting to it's like wanting to upgrade life to me. Like I feel like and just move these pieces around and just be on board with the freshness and the newness and in the leaving what doesn't work, and sticking or like developing further what does, or moving towards something that could be more promising than what you're currently working with, energy, all the above.
Yeah, and then that inferior Kazemi, that conjunction of Mercury, like being purified in the heart of the sun, like that's a moment to clear, perceptions, reset perceptions, clear away the mental clutter, so to speak, so that this emancipatory sort of consciousness can kind of come through. Like, what is actually holding me back? Like, what do I need to decode so that I can open up to this and flow with change? I think that'll be, again, that very interior sort of quality. Like, there's going to be a lot of inside job or inner
Yeah.
work going on here, uh, which is wild. Like, for those who you might be listening don't know, like, we have those superior and inferior conjunctions, and when we get the inferior one, it always makes me think of interior, because Mercury's like on the inside or in the middle,
Hmm.
between the earth and the sun from our perception. So it's really taking that Kazemi sort of ember of purification, like deep into the heart of our awareness. um yeah, it that's it's pretty special.
It
And I feel like
does.
it's a real
Real
hinge
special.
of that season, because it's like everything is kind of leading down into this Kazemi kind of place. And yeah, it's got a real hub or a real heart of the wheel kind of quality. Like, it's all been leading to this, and there's going to be a shift in your perspective.
Yeah.
This might be the true moment, the true nugget of the season, among
I
many
love
other
that.
nuggets.
Yeah, there's some nuggets, but I feel where you're going with that, because what we have to take in mind post this point, right, is that Mars is about to station direct. We're like 5 days out from Mars stationing direct, and it is ruled by that Mercury. So if it's about to emerge and all of a sudden like its ruler gets into this very like like privy position with the sun, and is like lit up by like the Uranian action, and then Uranus is answering to that Venus in Aquarius, which is getting ready to trine Mars,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I love what you said about this like internal, that kind of inside job energy, and kind of taking it all in, and maybe there'll be elements of the like the relational kind of outer play that will be apparent on the outside, with both Venus and Mars kind of coming together in this trine, and in a more kind of visible and outward sort of space. But there's a lot churning in, and there's a lot of realizations and ahas, and kind of just, yeah, just like you said, like that perception, that just, because sometimes that's all it is. Like we can, like you get that little nugget of perception that can change your whole reality in a
Mm-hmm.
moment, you know? And that's what essentially, that's what a breakthrough is you break through, you know, the perceived glass ceiling of your of your mind, or how you view things, your viewpoint, and then it all changes. And especially with Venus going on her own journey, right? We've seen her talk to a stationing Mercury. We've seen her meld with Pluto. We've seen her getting kind of juiced up by Jupiter. And now she's like, okay, my other half, Mars. All right, let's do this. We can work together. We're on the same page. I know you're still a
Mm-hmm.
little weak right now. Maybe I have some positioning over you, but it's because you've come to terms with something. It's because it's like Mars has had a realization, essentially,
Mm-hmm.
um, because of what Mercury has gone through. And that's the idea of like the planet turning direct, is that it's emerging. It's like, the sick person that was sick is now beginning to feel well again and can finally about to leave the bed.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just love like the setup of all of this personally, from an inside view, from a relational view, from just like a practical how you're building your world and your surroundings and your job and your outside efforts. All of it seems to just kind of come together.
Yeah, definitely. I think breakthrough is a big key word for this, like a change in perception that allows you to basically interface with a whole new reality, as you said. And thanks to that, Uranus. But it's nice that Venus is edging up to Mars. And and how talking about the Mars recovering or healing or picking up speed makes me think of Venus as almost like arriving with some bandages or balm for the war torn Mars. So Florence Nightingale, she's carrying the lamp to Mars and saying, okay, it's all about love and let's move forward, clarified in our direction, but letting our hearts be the guide or something.
Oh man. And so, I mean, that being said, it feels like a very eventful week, the first weekend of the year, from the basically the full moon on the 6th, the 7th, the 8th, the 9th through the 10th. Is like Friday through Monday. There's just this really potent astrology that is taking place.
Yeah,
So
it feels pretty epic.
it does feel pretty epic. It's definitely epic for this season and probably beyond. To see where it carries us past that point. And so basically we have Mercury retrograde who's going to go on and it's going to square Chiron on or the 10th or 10th, 11th, somewhere in there. Um read my notes here, and it's going to trine the North Node. So it's kind of mimicking those sun moves from before. And keep in mind, Mercury's already made all these moves, right? Because it's navigated. Um, actually, today, as Debbie and I speak, Mercury is squaring Chiron at this particular day. And tomorrow, Mercury trines the North Node. So I guess we're kind of tapping into that now as we look ahead. We're looking ahead and, and
Oh.
disseminating the future. That makes a lot of sense. But we have this just, Mercury configuring to the North Node feels very promising, especially in this grand Earth trine on the 11th with the moon in Virgo. So we
Hmm.
have this just flow of lunar energy that is feeding all the Capricorn. It's feeding all the Taurus. So it's almost like midweek, probably later on Tuesday, but definitely Wednesday, the 11th of January, and even, through the 12th. Seems like very purposeful and forward directed and getting the ball rolling and like just getting things done, TC being feels like
Yeah.
this is what this is about.
Yeah, absolutely. It's got that feeling of like, all right, let's start putting the pieces into place. I feel
Move
like
this train along.
I know. I think for me, it takes at least a week or two to feel into the new year, like to realize, like, okay, yeah, it is a new year. Um, and I feel like that coincides with that practicality, organization, maybe boxing things up, maybe tidying up, and um, yeah, kind of having our environment a little bit primed for some of the things that we want to do.
Yeah. Because I mean, it's very physical. We were talking about a grand earth trine. We are dealing with the here and now on this on this physical plane, and utilizing our resources, moving the things around us,
Mm-hmm.
dealing with our jobs, dealing with our money, dealing with our possessions. All these things are going to be in a flow, which is great. Because there's not that much resistance. While basically the big news is that Mars stations direct on the following day on January
Mm.
12th.
Mm-hmm.
So this could be because I essentially that moon, that earth flow will be in a square to that Mars, right? So as the Earth begins to flow, Mars has that moon challenge to it right before it goes direct. And the sun comes and hangs out where Mercury and Venus were earlier in the year, right? With
Mm-hmm.
the sun sextiling Neptune. So we're back at the vision, right? Well, that's so interesting as we start to move the puzzle of the Earth pieces, and Mars is coming out of its slumber, and we have a like a bright spotlight on the vision of, what's the vision, but also what needs to be released and let go of in service to the vision, right? Um, these are all, and then the moon's going to be opposing Neptune at that same time. So yeah, the January 11th and 12th. I mean, we've talked about some really potent days, but this is another interesting lineup too.
It feels kind of like when the rubber is just about to hit the road. This is like, all right, the lights are on, you know, intentions are set. Maybe the resolutions are really clear. Wow, oh my god, like what is that gonna feel like when Mars finally goes direct again? I'm almost starting to forget what Mars feels like. It's so, oh, it's in such a strange pocket in my consciousness and embodiment right now.
I hear that. I definitely hear that. I mean, it's stations on my Mars. So
Oh, you got Mars and Gemini.
I
Oh,
do have
wow.
Mars and Gemini. So,
Mm.
but it's interesting, like you saying that where just taking in Mars energy right now is perplexing. It's a little perplexing, and it's off the radar, but it's not, because it's always there. And so I'm like really looking forward to it kind of coming back online again. At least in the sense of like it having some sort of forward directive or a mission that it will eventually achieve, right? Because it's moving so slow. Like no Mars issues are going to be rocketing forward at this time, but at least it's a lot clearer than it was when it's
Yeah, well,
stationed and square Neptune,
oh boy.
Especially as the
We'll
sun,
think.
right? The sun sextiling Neptune, Mars is emerging after the square action. Like, I mean, maybe we get some sort of like clarity around that confusion of, you know, mission or direction.
Yeah, it's like if the sun and Neptune are flowing, um, it's I think it's sort of bringing things into focus, and we really need that intentionality and focus, that solar focus, to kind of know how to direct and harness Mars. I mean, the sun is like, the leader, the ruler. It's from that conscious place that we know how to disseminate Mars, say the soldier, the protector, the defender. But this is sort of like a Mars that at the end of its retrograde, it makes me think of like after a lot of bed rest, you might want to jump out of bed and just start leaping and running, but you got to remember your muscles might not be conditioned.
Yeah.
Things are maybe withered a little bit. You
A
might be a
little
bit
floppy.
dehydrated. Makes me think of like when my brother was a little kid, he was like climbing around on a neighbor's motorcycle and it tipped over and broke his leg.
Oh
And then he,
no.
he had to get a cast. And I remember when they took the cast off his leg that was inside the cast had kind of withered a little bit because it
Yeah.
was stationary for so long. So it makes me think of like that Mars power, the Mars muscles. They've maybe winnowed down and withered a little bit. So let's just slowly ramp up and get our conditioning back. And, um, you know, before you, it's just like hopping out of bed and then
Yeah.
falling down because you feel uh, like kind
You
of
thought you were ready,
weakened.
but
Yeah. I'm so
you
ready. Whoa, wait.
well, I need a little patience here. I need to work this through a little bit more.
Yeah, it won't
Um,
take long. Well,
yeah.
Mars will do what Mars will do.
Yeah, but yeah, give it a little bit of time. But at least the health is back. The intention's there. Mercury's trine the North Node on the same day it stations. Like it seems very like a fated period of just understanding or conceiving it all, or just having like kind of that. Yeah, there's like the missing pieces are now starting to fall into place, and we might not be able to finish the puzzle, but we know where everything goes, if
Mm-hmm.
that makes sense. Like we've got our piles here and our piles there, and we just have to put it in. But that's a step by step, one foot in front of the other process.
Yeah, like the sorting is the harder work, but once you're sorted and your work is cut out for you,
It's pretty
uh,
straightforward.
yeah, exactly. And then I suppose, yeah, because then that'll be the last pass of Mars out of uh, Gemini forward into the following seasons. So,
Oh, can't wait. So now, where that does take us, though, a few days later into the weekend, on the 14th, on Saturday, we have that last quarter moon in Libra. And some of the tension might come back up, we get to the point where everything's moving and flowing, but we are confronted with another leg of pivot, another leg of initiating energy. But it's like that kind of closing down, so to speak, with the Libra last quarter that's going to be in a square to Pluto, because basically the sun
mhm.
is going to it's an interesting lineup. So just to cap the last few days of Capricorn season, pun intended, I suppose. We have that last quarter in Libra, and we have and obviously Venus is ruling that, right?
Mhm.
And so Venus in Aquarius is also coming off of a square to Uranus. Shows she's a little wily right now, right? She's getting the dose of Uranian action, but it's a little bit of a harder activating dose of Uranus during this last quarter. So it's, relationally, creatively, socially, there's something that kind of buzzes forward that is probably going to play into this last quarter in Libra, which when you think about the outside world, there can be definitely some social unrest, or kind of like people protesting certain things, or justice related matters, especially with the last quarter in Libra. But it's all
Mhm.
on this lead up to Mercury stationing direct on the 18th, on the very same day that the sun conjuncts Pluto. So Capricorn season is, it kind of ends with with a little bit of a, I don't want to say a harsher note, but there it does seem very potent. So anything you can kind of extract from that lead up?
Um, is this going to be the last time the sun conjoins Pluto and Capricorn for some time?
One more
Or are we
time.
one more time because it's going to retrograde in and out of Aquarius, Pluto,
Yeah.
correct?
And so, well, the last one will be next year, but it is the second to last.
Yeah. Okay. So almost. Um that could definitely be a real point of, reflection and taking stock. Um, any lingering fears or sort of sober moments of facing up to things that, we need to confront. It could be a really good opportunity to do that. Um, but yeah, I know it's sort of just like, the sun is like, say, our conscious awareness, or where the energy is at the moment, or where the energy is flowing and joining up with um, Pluto. It's probably just shining a light on, the shadows once again, and
Yeah.
kind of illuminating um, what we need to kind of say confront within ourselves. Or maybe there's going to be stories about, you know power dynamics or power extremes cropping up in the world. Um, so, yeah, this is going to be one of the last times the sun really joins up with the Plutonian signature in Capricorn. So, I don't know. just seems like a point of reflection. I don't want to make like too too big of a deal about it and make it sound like really ominous and scary, but it's yeah, I think it's a definitely an opportunity to dig really deep, reflect really deeply, and it's sort of closing out the season. So maybe it's confronting, some of the realities that came up with a lot of enthusiasm and stops and starts, and definitely putting a stake in our intentions and inceptions and resolutions. I almost said revolution.
Well,
There's a little of
there
that
is
in
a
there
lot of
too.
Uranian energy going on
So
here.
I don't know, maybe it's shining a light on like maybe we have to shake our foundations even deeper than we thought to affect, real and lasting change inside and without.
Yeah. Yeah, because I that's the kind of the nature of this particular season is I mean, the Capricorn pivot of the cardinal energy, but the setup here with Jupiter leading it all off, and then all the energy that we see afterwards is like if we are in the cycle of change and we're laying foundations and we're like, getting the soil right and like intending to go in this direction and emerging into this point, it's like yeah, we just become aware. We become aware of how much we've changed. We become aware of what's changing. That can be uncomfortable at times, right? There could still be fear around change, and in the newness and the what's building. Um, and there just can be exposure, right? It's like that's the thing
Mm-hmm.
with just this last quarter, especially in Libra and then Venus in a very, communal societal sign squaring Uranus. It's like I could definitely see something being exposed that comes out and all of a sudden, like it's an injustice of sorts and people are going to take
Mm.
action on it and we got to deal with these power dynamics and there's too much power here and we got to shine a light on that. So it feels
Mm-hmm.
very apropos for like the larger story, but just in our own lives, like you said, the sun, I mean, it's the soul, it's our solar force. It's our point of individuation, our sense of self and the identity. I like to think that we all want to live an empowered life, right? We want to
Mm-hmm.
know our strength and honor our power and move from a place of power. And many of us don't live in the full capacity of what our power is. And so sometimes we have to do those deep dives within ourselves and shine a light on what holds us back from being all that we could possibly be in this world.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and by addressing that and shining a light on it and warming it up, right? As you pointed out earlier in the program, when we think about Saturn energy and Capricorn energy and just being this cold and dry space, and the sun, it's hot, it's warm. And it's a little dry itself, but it's still, it's giving us that heat and that life within death, like that's the thing with Pluto and it being connected with that kind of death impulse and what changes and transforms and morphs and regenerates. There's a purpose for that. And through
Yeah.
that, we're empowered in that process. And we can step into that kind of like stripped off version of ourself that isn't mucked up with things that hold us back from our real potential. So maybe that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like the higher side of what this time period could look like.
Yeah, for sure. It's got a kind of a resurrective, I shall rise again kind of signature. Like, and I think about the Plutonian domain, say in the psyche or in the soulscape, it's very much that, unconscious or shadowy territory where there is a tremendous amount of archetypal power brewing, but that can kind of run our lives or control our lives until we shine a light on it and are conscious of it. And it's sort of bringing all of that into the fold, into the light of our awareness. And, then we can uptake it and metabolize it and integrate it. And then it becomes something that feeds our sovereign power and not this strange lurking, um, it's sort of externalized power that seems like it's coming from somewhere else, but really it could be something deeply entrenched inside of us that, like you say, like you just have to like face it. And some of it can be really big. It can be really big, potent, kind of archetypal, permeating, transcendent powers that kind of are transpersonal in a way that we have to reckon with, and admit and own that they're also moving through us and are a part of us, and grapple with that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the saving grace within this time period too, as we kind of dissect that a little bit more, in which I didn't notice at first, but is glaringly apparent now, is, that last quarter position as we lead into there is also trine Saturn, which is,
Mm.
as we go through all this Capricorn season activity, and Saturn's kind of just been on its own in this like very loose square with Uranus at this point,
Mhm.
um, it's almost like Saturn finally comes in and is like, okay, you've been waiting to hear from me, haven't you?
Right. This is what I've been trying to tell you.
Right.
I have been testing you and fortifying you and strengthening you, and now you're ready to shine a light on what lurks in the Plutonian realm and reckon
Yeah.
with it.
Reckon with it. Yeah. It's reckoning. It's judgment day.
Reckoning
Um,
day.
that's funny.
But
What a way, what a
yeah.
way to go out for Capricorn season. I think that's, yeah, it's
Yeah.
beautiful.
All, as you say, grist for the mill. Just utilize it, take it in, um, you know, embody it, and think about the ways, like I said, like that we've been tested. Those are also the ways that we've been made stronger. It's some signature of like fortitude, I think, that is waiting for us if we are very resolute in this season.
So that being said, if you had one word to recap this year's Capricorn season, what would it be?
One word?
One word.
That's hard for Mercury and
I
Sag
know.
native.
That's the challenge after every forecast. You get one word.
All right, then. I think it's resolve.
It's a good word.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good word. And it
Mm-hmm.
sums up a lot of it's a multi-layered word. So it's jiving with your Mercury and Sag. You can come at it from a couple
Right.
different ways of, point of definition with that.
Because solve is, the root of like also dissolve. So something that has been taken apart and dissolved and deconstructed, but then you resolve to pull it all back together, like in a more cohesive and stronger form. So again, it's that echoing of the Neptunian flow and the Uranian forces of change that are kind of pushing on the season as well. Yeah, we're in a state of flux and evolution, and things are constantly breaking down, and in that catabolic composting, but it's all just to serve new life or new perceptions. And um yeah, so
I like
resolve.
that. Well, and it's like resolve is the resolution, right? That's the resolution to our to our issues and our troubles. And they always
Mm-hmm.
come back and they always evolve into new things.
Mm-hmm.
But with the current climate and the retrogrades and everything we've been through, I feel like there's a few of us out there that could really benefit from a time period of resolve, where
Mm-hmm.
internally and externally. So I like it. I think it's great. Um, all right. Well, I'm like trying to think of what word I would have for it, because that's a really good
Oh
word.
yeah, I'd be
And
curious to know.
that is a good word. That is a good word. Um, the only word that came to mind is just dedication. And
Mm.
it's very loose in terms of what that could look like. And it's a blanket Saturnian term. But I think at this point in a lot of our stories, it's like, what do you really want to dedicate yourself to
Mm-hmm.
after all this?
Yeah.
After all this, what do you actually have like the will to dedicate yourself towards? And if you don't, Then drop it off. Leave it at a Uranus transit, throw it in
Mm-hmm.
the Neptune pool,
Right.
Because life is
Exactly.
short. We only have so much time. We only have so much energy. This is a very Capricorn message, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like if you don't have it within you to give your full dedication to something, put your all into it, then it's like
Mm-hmm.
what's the point?
Yeah. And I think Saturn's sort of editing and discerning energy really can help winnow down to what is like essential or what is most meaningful and worth dedicating, you know, our mortal reserves to, And I also think of that word dedication. It's like if you're, say, an artist or an author or a musician, it's like, who do I dedicate this to? It's like,
Mm,
who who does this go out to? Like, I'm doing this because it's worth it, but I also, it's a bit of an offering as well.
yeah.
So
Oh, I like
yeah,
that.
because that'll be part of, maybe what you offer to the world is what will endure and maybe be a legacy of yours of sorts. So I
Yeah.
kind of believe we were all born at this time because there's something about our souls that were made for this time.
Cheers to that.
Cheers to that. Let's get a
Cheer, a little cup
Capricorn
cheers.
mug.
Cup cheers. We're cheersing. All right, Debbie. Well, I think we did it. I think we did a full astute treatment to the Capricorn season this year. And despite a few challenges, I'm still I'm excited for this energy. I'm feeling it.
Yeah, me too.
Um, so now where can people find you? What do you got going on? Tell us the dish.
Oh, well, my website is starfruitastrology.com. There you can see uh, my offerings of readings or any upcoming events I might have for the new year. If you'd like to follow me on Instagram, it's starfruit underscore astrology. That's it. Don't be fooled by any other versions
I
because
know.
we know there's a lot of those going on. And I also have a podcast with my husband, Brian James, of The Medicine Path. And he is really interested in depth psychology and the archetypes of that world. And we mash that up with my astrological take on some of our famous people. And we track the zodiac seasons. So we're working our way through Sagittarius right now. And that podcast is called Archetypology with an exclamation point. And you can listen to it on Spotify and iTunes.
Lovely. So definitely go check Debbie out and all she's got going on. And of course, I'll leave links to that on my own website because I always do a podcast. I always do a podcast. That's true, but I always do a blog post for each episode and the featured guest. So come on over to energeticprinciples.com and you can check that out there along with my own services and offerings if you're looking to get a consultation. That is there too. And of course, sign up for the Heavenly Wind, which is my monthly newsletter, which will be going out here somewhat shortly on the first of the month. And it has been newly revised. So it's a little more concise and I would like to think straightforward, a more digestible read. So you can get that into your inbox for free each month by signing up on the front page of my website. You can also find me on Instagram at Energetic Principles, and I am barely posting these days. I do like to post stories here and there, but I think I say this every time. I'm trying to navigate the energy of social media. It's just been very weird for me lately. And it could be the Mars retrograde, honestly, and in Gemini. I feel like that is tied in a little bit. But Capricorn season is my season of the third house. So perhaps I'll have more to say. So go follow me. Go follow me there and see if I pop up. Other than that, if you like what you heard here today, leave a review wherever you listen to this podcast, or if you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment below. Tell us what you think Capricorn season will bring, or what you're excited about Capricorn season, or if you have Capricorn placements and want to, share your wisdom of what Capricorn means to you in the feed below. We'd love to hear a little bit more about that. And sharing is caring. Spread the good word. Share this program with a friend or anybody that you think would like astrology or Capricorn season, or just likes to listen to podcasts, because this is a meaty one. Plenty time. Throw it on in the background. Let us just whisper into your ear about the potentials coming.
Percolate and distill down into the bones.
Yeah, let us seed in.
It's a good bone broth episode.
It is a good bone broth. Yeah, that's right. And everybody needs a nourishing bone broth. So we're here for you for that. So, all right. Well, Debbie, thank you so much for joining me on the program. It was a pleasure chatting with you, and I hope you'll visit me again soon.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Well, good luck with all the Jupiter action underway in the holiday season, and happy solstice to all. We will see you on the other side. And as always, may the stars be with you.